It'll pop up. Stephanie, welcome to
Hi.
the Onward podcast, the live version of it.
Yeah, this is fun doing the live version of it.
Is this the first time that you've done something live like this?
Yeah, because usually, I can make a mistake and somebody says, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll just, edit it." I
Yeah,
I'm uneditable in this moment. So,
that's right. You have to be perfect.
oh no, not that, not again.
No, I'm not going to put that pressure on you. So this is the second time you've been on the Onward podcast. I can't remember when's your last.
I think it was about a year.
It
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed talking about with you. You've written a couple of books, and one of them that we talked about the last time you were on is a delightful little book on aging. That was on the last Onward podcast episode. And we can talk about that some tonight too. And then you've got another book coming out, Creatrix Rising, Unlocking the Power of Midlife Women. So I love this. Oh, it looks like I left a quote out of there, but
It's okay. I'm sure people will get
so anyway, I just really enjoy talking with you, I guess, because you're the topic about just aging and what it's like as a woman and how far women have come and unlocking the power of us, of ourselves. So go ahead.
Well, we were talking a little bit about that just, before we went live.
Yes.
And I was sharing with you that I had done some research about what had happened just in my lifetime. Because, you really kind of get a read on like how far you've come and then like how much further you have to go and how some of the things that we take for granted now haven't really been laws very long. And what comes to mind is that when I graduated, was of graduation age from college, so I would have been 22. Women could not get their own credit cards without a signature of a male relative or a husband. And it didn't matter if you had a lot of money. It didn't matter if you had a great job. It didn't matter if you had good credit. You could not get a credit card without a male signature on the application till the 1974 Fair Credit Act. And then gender was not an issue. And that changed. That was in my lifetime. So that still kind of surprises me that even in my 30s, there was a law that had to be made to protect women that had young children at home, because a company could say, look, you've got young kids. We're not interested in hiring a woman with young kids. You might get called away from work one day and go have to pick your kid up from school. And they could legally do that. That's my lifetime. So in a way, I've seen like all these changes. There were a lot of legislative changes in the 70s that benefited women. And on into the 80s and 90s. And then you saw kind of the commercial aspect creep in to feminism, which kind of muddied the waters a little bit. But I don't know if any of your viewers are old enough to remember, there was a Tarrington commercial. I'd rather fight than switch, for Tarrington cigarettes. And it was a woman with a black eye holding a pack of cigarettes. I'd rather fight than switch. And then Virginia Slims had a very famous slogan, "You've come a long way, baby."
Baby. Yes, I remember that one.
Right. So that was like that kind of the extent of, feminism had arrived once it became commercialized in the culture. But just,
wow,
it's amazing in my lifetime.
I remember talking to my mom about some of this, because now I'm going to forget the name of the TV show, Mad Men, I think it was, where I think that's where it was. And just the smoking and the drinking in the office back then too. I even remember when I was a lieutenant in the Navy, my boss, the lieutenant commander, smoking in the office. I mean, it was allowed at the time, and people were allowed to smoke on ships. So some of the things like people like my daughter, who's 25, are so used to today about like the no smoking, or about what she can go get a credit card. She didn't have to have a guy sign off on her getting a credit card or opening a bank account or buying a house or whatever. It's easy to just kind of take it for granted when you're younger like that, and not really realize that, look, Emily and Stephanie aren't that old and they remember some of this stuff.
Right. Or I think if, your daughter and her age now, like what she sees of her own feminist history at this time. And I think about the Women's March in 2017.
Yes.
And how powerful that was, that women came together cooperatively with a sense of unity and a sense of focus in a way that women never had before. I mean, in my little town, I was living in Ashland, Oregon at the time, and there was an article in the newspaper talking about a women's march. And my husband pointed it out to me and he said, "Oh, look, there's going to be like 600 people." Well, my town was small, 20,000 people. 10,000 people showed up for this march. It was like, half the town and the surrounding area. And I think about that moment and what a defining moment it is and what grew out of that, because the very next year in 2018, what we saw is more women ran for political office at a local, state, and national level than ever before in the history of this country. So that's, in your daughter's life, it's like, she was alive in that moment when women really started to run for public office and say, I have something to contribute. And, now they can't get rid of us.
Why is it so important to participate in events like the Women's March?
Well, I mean, there's a list of reasons. One is that often human beings think that we are more alone than we really are. And the thing that makes us feel connected is to get out and share our stories with other people. And that was an example of a story that was shared between hundreds and thousands of women that had just kind of had it. You think about the women in that march and what were they all wearing? They had all home and they had knitted pussy hats. And it was a way of saying, you know what? You don't get to do this anymore. This is unacceptable. In fact, we're going to mock it. And so getting together for that, finding the punchline, something other than just the suffering, finding the strength that so many women were inspired by that march that, oh my gosh, they ran for political office the very next year. And now it's, there's a momentum and a movement that is really changing the way that we see ourselves as we age and the way the culture sees us as we age. And aging is a feminist issue for women.
Well, why are you so interested in this topic? I mean, why do you think? I mean, have you been interested in it the whole, your whole life, or is it just you've gotten older and it's been more important? Or
I mean, certainly it's become more in my face as I've gotten older, and I'm one of those people that I've been living the examined life for a long time. So how we are as human beings fascinates me. But I think that where it really started was I was raised by a single mother at a time when there weren't single mothers. And so I remember a specific incident when I was 10 or 11 years old, where my mom came home from work one day and she worked for a big sporting goods store that had 3 or 4 stores in the Denver area. And she was the head of their collections department. And she came home and she said, "They got me an assistant. I'm going to be able to do so much more. They've given me, this young man is going to be working with me. And I'm so excited because I'm going to be able to do so much more for the company." So, few months went by. She came home from work again and she was in tears.
Oh, no.
I was like, "Mom, what's wrong?" She said, "I quit my job today." "What do you mean you quit your job?" She said, "Well, I found out that my assistant, who was a young man, was getting paid more than me." Now, at 10 or 11 years old, whatever that was, I knew there was something terribly wrong with that this guy had just come onto the company. And she went on to tell me that she had confronted her boss and said, "Why is he getting paid more?" And her boss said, "Well, Cleo," my mother's name was Cleo, "he has a family to support." And my mother said, "So do I." And so I remember that moment and it really impacted me. I never forgot the story, that the world between men and women wasn't always a level playing field. So I think that's where my interest began. And because, because my heart broke for her and because as a little girl, I couldn't really bring her comfort in that moment.
Wow. Wow. What did she do next for employment? Do you know?
Yes, I do. She got snatched up by St. Joseph's Hospital in Denver, Colorado, and she remained their collections manager until she left work, till she retired. So she moved on. She was able to move on. And that was the other thing that I learned from her was that when you fall down, you stand up and you brush yourself off and you move on.
What a great role model that you had, your mom.
Truly.
Yeah. So tell us about you picked the title for this session. So, when I have people sign up for the live sessions, I like for them to, tell me what they want to talk about. And I'm looking through it here. And then, what do you think that a good title would be? And you said, the new emerging archetype of midlife women.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that. And I see that some people are watching, so feel free to submit comments. And ask Stephanie some questions too. It doesn't have to be all me. And we kind of we match.
Yeah, we do. We didn't even
plan it.
We do match. I love that. I love that. So the new archetype is that, well, first of all, let's go back to the old archetype, because that's really where this begins. So there was a poet and novelist in the 1930s named Robert Graves, who came up with the premise of Maiden Mother Crone. That was his muse. Maiden Mother Crone was his poetic muse. And it seeped into the culture a bit after he published a book called The White Goddess, which was an homage to his muse. And the phrase kind of seeped into the culture, and we began to see this as a summation of a woman's life, Maiden Mother Crone. But the word crone really rankles me, because wordsmith that I am, words count. They're important. And crone entered the lexicon about the 1830s. And the definition of crone is a disagreeable old woman. And no woman that I know that title, right? Like, no. I don't want to be seen as the crone. So it's like something needed to replace the crone. And I began thinking about, well, actually the whole trilogy should be replaced, because maiden and, connotes kind of images of virgins dancing through the forest or something. And it's just kind of condescending. It's not really who young women are today. And, mother still holds as mother, but I think the definition of mother has changed. It's not the Madonna kind of figure. It's someone that's really engaged in life, and they happen to be raising children. But this word crone just really got me. So I started looking for new words, and I came up with the transformer, but that sounded like some kind of toy that a kid plays with.
Yeah.
Transformers. I think they made a movie called Transformers. I looked at words like sage and wizard, but those are distinctly male words. So the editor I was working with came up with the word creatrix. I thought she had made it up, but once I began to research, creatrix is one of the 3 Greek fates. There was the spinner, the weaver, and the cutter, and the creatrix was the weaver. And the word is distinctly feminine, and it means a woman who makes things. Now, that's something that I can identify with, because in my midlife and older years, I make things. The years for bearing children are gone. And here's an interesting question to contemplate. There is a reason that nature keeps us alive past motherhood. Because we're not for the proliferation of the species, certainly anymore. So what's the reason? And I think the reason is that this is a time of great creativity. It's a time when we make things. It's a time that we get more reflective, more contemplative about what it is that we make. That women make life that is akin to making art. That's how women do life.
Oh, I love that. I can see all that happening with me right now in my life. Yeah. Wow.
So thus the name of the broadcast, and also the name of the book, Creatrix Rising, Unlocking the Power of Midlife Women. And the power, of course, is in this great surge of creativity that I think happens like at the onset of menopause. That menopause, even though we know that it's a physiological process and it's all about the hormones and things, you can really see it as a spiritual and psychological bridge from one phase of a woman's life to another. And it's that bridge that goes from the motherhood phase to the creatrix phase of life.
Yeah, definitely. So that's your next book that's coming out in August.
That's the one that's coming out in August, but it is available for pre-order. So hop on over to Amazon.
Yeah, I wouldn't have, I didn't look up that term Creatrix, but I would have thought it would have been something that, somebody made up.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I thought
that
too.
story. Yeah. So what are the kinds of things that you cover in there about unlocking the power?
Well, one of the things that I'm really big on right now is the power of women telling their stories, sharing their stories with other women. That how we connect is through our story. And also knowing the power of our own personal feminist history. I mean, there is a feminist history that happens outside of us, like the Women's March, right?
Right.
But then there's that feminist history
One.
that's happening inside of us at the same time. And in every family, there are stories. There's the first woman that played a musical instrument. There was the first woman that went to college. There was the first woman to graduate from college. I was the first woman in my matriarchy to graduate from college in my family. So that's part of my feminist story. So part of what I cover is I talk about my mother, of course, my grandmother, and my great grandmother, Eva. And I have this little exercise at the end of one of the chapters that I learned from a writer named Joan Borisenko, who's written a lot about women. And the exercise is that you stand in a room and you close your eyes and you picture this line of women behind you. And first is your mother, and then there's your grandmother, and then there's your great grandmother. And pretty soon the faces begin to fade because you haven't met all those women, and yet they're in your DNA. And there is something about their lives, whether you've ever met them or heard their stories, that informs your life here, now. And so, as much as you can dig around in those kind of past stories, there are some real gems. This is one of the great things about Ancestry.com is that you can find out more about your personal feminist history because of the women in your life and what they did and how they did it. Like my mom being a single mom, she raised me at a time when women weren't divorced. They just weren't, but she was.
I think about my grandmother a lot because I live in the same town that my dad's mom. I live in the same town that she lived in when she passed away in Stanton, Virginia. And I can't find the article, but she made it in the paper because she swam a lot at the YMCA. And she, I think she was in her 70s or 80s when this article came out about how she was swimming so much. And I don't know if she had swum a mile or more than that. I'm not really sure. But I just remember that article coming out. And I go swim a lot. And so I just think about her. I feel like I'm swimming in the same pool that she did.
My gosh.
And it's just kind of, it just makes me feel close to her. And I wish, it makes me want to, wish that I could go back in time and talk to her a little more and ask her some questions. I mean, my dad's still around. He's 86 and my dad's sister's 88. And she talks more than my dad does about their childhood and what it was like growing up and stuff like that. So it's fun talking to my aunt and learning a lot about my grandmother.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, did she live in a time where exercise wasn't really considered a very ladylike thing to do?
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, and she obviously rose up against that. She pushed against the obstacles that kept her from doing life on her own terms, which is really, I think, what feminism is about.
Yeah.
And managed to, be written up in the local paper. I love that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. And she used to walk all the time. So maybe that's where I get all my exercising and stuff.
Maybe that is, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like the DNA is passed along.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a daughter? I think we talked about.
No, I don't have kids.
Yeah. Okay.
I have dogs.
So do I. She's sitting over there. How would your work impact you if you did have kids, if you were raising a daughter,
Well, I mean, I would probably share the same message with them that I've shared with my nieces. I have a very sweet, great niece, my great niece, Nancy Ann, who lives in Denver, who I was talking to the other day. And she said, I love the work you're doing in the world. But she said, you've always had this message. Even when I was in college, you were telling me this stuff.
Okay.
I didn't realize that, I had been, kind of pushing her, hurting her, as it were, towards, do life on your own terms. Do what makes you happy in your heart. Don't worry about, molding yourself for someone else. That was a lot of the problem with my generation. The competition with men in my generation was money, and the competition with women was men. And I don't think it's that way anymore. But, if I go back to my 20s and 30s, that's absolutely what was going on in the culture.
Yeah. You say in what you submitted to me that empowered is an overused word with an underutilized definition.
Yeah, I kind of get, I'm almost as sick of the word empowered as I am Zoom these days,
You must be pretty sick of it then.
Well, empowered is one of those words that's become more like a platitude. We talk about it's empowering. And when it stays in the realm of talk or in the realm of feeling, I'm feeling empowered, you don't get the real meat of what being empowered is. And empowered is an action. It's an action of how you live your life. It's an action of how you demonstrate your strength and your confidence in the world, in spite of your fears, in spite of the challenges, in spite of the obstacles. That's real empowerment. But I just feel like the word kind of caught on, and it's one of those things that's been, it's just been overused to the point where it doesn't hold the same meaning. It needs to be an action. Empowerment is an action.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, you can say I feel empowered, but if you're not taking empowered action, then feeling that way or whatever. Yeah. Well, how do you get that confidence and conviction? How do women get that confidence?
I think that women have it innately. It's just that we often don't trust the way it looks. Like I have often said that courage does not look like Wonder Woman with the brass bracelets and the breastplate and stuff. Courage looks like baby barf on your shoulder and skinned knees. And the women that fall down and stand up and are able to build their success on the back of failure instead of seeing failure as, some great character flaw, those are strong, confident women. Women that will stand up and speak in front of a group, even though their voice is quivering, that's real courage. That is what builds confidence. And I just think that it's a little by little, step by step thing that we do. And of course, one of the things that we can also do that empowers us, and it once again is an action, is to always support and encourage the women around us.
I hear people say that, but I don't always see it in action.
I think that it can be, I think that the action is maybe more simple than we think it is. And I think that, supporting encouragement can be something as simple as telling someone, acknowledging someone, what they've given in your life. Like I would acknowledge to you, I appreciate your belief in me that you would have me back on your podcast. It means a lot that you would do that. That's a kind of an acknowledgement that we can give to other women that kind of lifts us up a little bit. It's like someone saying nice shoes.
It's like, it's a lot of times I think too, that's a good point, because we think that, but then we don't like verbalize it. We don't say it. You might be thinking, I'm so thankful that Emily's had me. Wow, she's had me on for a second time or whatever. But then if you never say it to me, then I don't know that you're thinking that. And we all have thoughts in our head about what other people are thinking. And, I could have the wrong thought in my head about what you're thinking. So that goes to show the importance of just saying just little things like that. It doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Yeah, it's to uplift, to support, to encourage is a small action with big results.
Yeah.
And we certainly want to do that with younger women, encourage them. It's like people have asked me, because I've written a couple of books that have the theme of aging in them. Well, it's like, what about being an elder and sharing your wisdom? And I go, that's the last thing you want to do is share your wisdom. Who do you want to listen to when you're 25 years old? So the way that you really share your wisdom, the way that you really elder, is by the way that you demonstrate life. the way you live your life, the demonstration of your life is what inspires a 25-year-old, not the fact that you can sit down with a 25-year-old and read her beads for her, because that's not going to be very accepted.
Yeah.
It wasn't when you were 25, and it's not going to be when she's 25.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actions speak louder than words, right? Yeah. And just demonstrating your confidence, or the importance of going to, that march, like you said, and just taking action like that, shows the younger generation.
Well, here's a great example of a woman who lived her life in a way that inspired those around her. And I met this woman named Austin. She was in her early 80s when I met her. And she invited me down to her house. We had bought the house up the hill from her. And she invited us down to have some wine and meet the neighbors. I thought it was lovely. And I got to her deck, and on her deck is this clawfoot old-fashioned bathtub, fully plumbed. And I said, Austin, I said, do you take baths out here? And she said, well, actually, yes. It's so much easier dealing with the tub than the hot tub. She said, it's too heavy to lift the cover for me now. So she runs a bath, and so she can soak under the stars. And I loved that about her.
Yeah.
I looked off into the distance, and I saw that there was a blue chandelier hanging from a tree off in the distance. And I thought, God, this is the freedom of a woman, that she's just not doing life for anybody but herself.
Wow.
And yet I couldn't help but pick up on it. Well, as it turned out, Austin had a drumming circle, and her drumming circle was filled with 20-somethings and 30-somethings and 40-somethings who came to hang out with this woman. And believe me, it wasn't because of anything she had to say. She wasn't imparting great wisdom, but she was living life in such a way that they went, yeah, that's how I want to do it.
Yeah, she's cool. Yeah, she's confident. She's like, yeah. So here we have a comment here. I'm not sure who it says. I really want to share this with women in my family. I wish I could have heard this 25 to 30 years ago, but so helpful here and now. Aw, I can't see who wrote that, but thank you very much for that comment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things I wish I'd learned 25 or 30 years ago that I just learned now. And it's one of the reasons I write them down, because I really do believe in the premise that we are all connected by our stories. And it's important for women to get together, whether it's for lunch, or there's 4 of you having wine, or there's whatnot, and start listening to each other in a way where you really hear each other's stories and find those little connections. I mean, it's what we used to do in an office in the coffee room in the morning, is we would tell stories about the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize now that it wasn't just small talk. It's like what we were looking for was the connection. The thing that I did, the thing that you did, that somehow there's a connection to us within that thing. And there's great power in that for women.
That's so true. I had a boss once that, just got really ticked off if, I won't say he or she, if this person saw people chit-chatting.
Oh, chit-chatting.
And, we're standing in the hall and having a conversation. And how do you know what they were talking about? Even if it was a few minutes of it was personal stuff and the rest was work, you have to develop relationships with people, right, and trust and bond in order to work well together.
Well, and what you've just said is like, really, this is what women are bringing to the workforce. This is what women are bringing to government, because we innately do this. We are cooperative by nature. Mm-hmm. And so when you have men that are working on career development and nothing but work, the paradigm of that often ends in a heart attack, because, you work yourself to death. So those moments of chit-chatting, those moments of establishing relationship, real connection, that can only add to the balance of work. And I think that companies are starting to realize that having workers that are in balance is as important. Well, I mean, it's an important piece of productivity. There's just no other way to slice it. It's like finding out that all these people could work from home,
right?
The pandemic. It's like, they could still focus, they could still get their work done. And maybe some of that was due to the fact that their family was so nearby, that there was a sense of comfort about working from home.
Yeah, no, I get it. Another thing I wanted to say is when I went to the Naval Academy, I was in the sixth class of women to graduate, right? And there were only about 72, I think, maybe 76 women out of 1,200 in my class. And we got together about, I don't know, maybe less than 10 years ago, and we were talking about that time. A lot of the women, it was at a reunion, and we were just saying how we wish that we had supported each other more back then. We were such a minority and picked on and harassed in such a way that we just stuck to ourselves. And actually, you know, to go see another woman, you might have to, I mean, besides your roommates, you might have to walk down the hallway. And in fact, when we were plebes, you don't walk, you have to run through the hallway, in the center of the hallway with your eyes in the boat, looking straight ahead. You can't turn your head to look and see which door you want to stop, you know, and go in. So it was nerve-wracking to even just go out in the hallway and go find another woman to talk to. So it took a lot of extra effort. Right. And we could have bonded together more and helped each other through that time. And we didn't do it as much as we wished we had back then.
Yeah. Well, we've got the opportunity for that now.
Yeah. And we are. And so we got together and we talked, and it was great. There's a lot of good friendships there. So, are you going to write another book?
Yes.
I was going to say, you seem like somebody to me who has several books in them.
This is an encore career for me. When I retired from my work life, this is all that I wanted to do. And I have a degree in writing and poetics, but, you know, life intervened when I was a younger woman, and there was a marriage to take care of, and there was a mortgage to pay, and there were businesses to run, and all of that. So now that I'm writing, I've decided that what writers do is they write. So I just can't imagine being at a time in my life where I didn't have like some kind of manuscript in front of me that I was developing. And
that's interesting. So I want to I don't know if I put your other book. Yeah, this is your first book, A Delightful Little Book on Aging. You want to tell us a little bit about that book?
Well, A Delightful Little Book on Aging is a compilation piece of essays and articles that I wrote over a few-year period as I was entering my 60s. Because every woman who turns 60 knows it's a threshold. And it's the threshold of what we, determine as being old age or older age. It comes with the baggage of the word retirement, which isn't a word I particularly like, because most of the women I know just aren't sitting around in Barca loungers. Not that there's anything wrong with sitting around in a Barca lounger, right. But most of the women I know want to be engaged somehow. So I wrote this book because I just wanted to see if it was different. And at the time that I was putting this together, I was writing a column for a very large website called 60andme.com. And I was getting all kinds of feedback from women my age who were going, yeah, right on. I'm not ready to go gently into that good night. I'm not ready to like cash it all in. And so there was this conversation, this dialogue started with, then how do you do your older years, and how do you identify yourself? You think that by the time that you're 60 years old or 65 years old, you've figured it out. Of course, I thought that at 35 too, that I
have 2 more years left to figure it out. I'm going to be 58 today, and then I'll be 60. So I have 2 years left to figure it all out, right?
But the bad news is that nobody has it figured out at 60 or 65. And that the truth about psychological development, spiritual development, is that it has the potential to happen until the day you die. So A Delightful Little Book on Aging was like all the good stuff that I could think about with the accumulating years. I wanted to embrace the years and not feel a sense of disdain or despair about them. I wanted to say there's something new. It's not, yes, you lose a certain amount of physical prowess. I don't run anymore. I don't play tennis anymore, but I still walk 3 miles a day. I still kayak. I still do yoga. So there's an adaptability piece that enters into that. But I wanted to be able to embrace the years. So that's what A Delightful Little Book on Aging is about, is it's meant as a little inspirational piece for embracing the years and saying, wow, life goes on, and this is a brave new world, a brave new adventure.
I mean, every time I've gotten older, I've not felt that age. I remember when I was in college and I used to think like a lieutenant in the Navy was old, and that they were probably like 25 or something. And then, the older you get, and now, my classmates are retiring and are admirals, very senior, and it's just like, and I get my name is further, my class is further and further back in my college, magazine that you get.
Right.
But in your mind, you don't feel like you're getting, I don't feel like I'm getting.
I mean, your mind and your heart. I remember, I tell a little story in a delightful little book on aging about the day that I was walking around the lake with my husband and his new business partner. And there were all kinds of exercise equipment around the lake. There were monkey bars and rings, and you could do chin-ups and stuff. And there was something about the monkey bars swinging from bar to bar. And it's like I could feel it in my body the way I used to do it when I was 8 years old. I could actually feel it. It was visceral. And whatever got into me, I climbed up the ladder and I did the first swing, and then boom, right on my yaya. And my husband came rushing over and he goes, what were you doing? Thinking. And, I didn't say it at the time. I thought about it later. Well, what was I trying to do? And it's like, well, I was trying to recapture this moment of youth that I didn't really believe had slipped away. In my heart and my mind, I could do it the same way I could do it when I was 8 years old. That was no longer my reality, unfortunately. But the heart and the mind don't change. The body does. And there is this amazing opportunity for adaptability, which is why so many older people did better in the pandemic than their younger counterparts, because they've had to learn adaptability as you get older. Because something changes doesn't mean you stop living life. It just means you adapt to whatever that is.
Yeah, you need to do that. I think a lot of times we let circumstances dictate our feelings or our thoughts, when really, circumstances are going to be changing all of the time. We can still be happy inside. In our hearts. We don't have to have our happiness depend on different circumstances.
Right.
Like, some people might say, well, when COVID's over, then I can then do this and this and this. And yeah, you can do those things, but you can also, I think we can also, I found happiness throughout COVID. I hope that, I know it's just been so hard for so many people and not everyone can find it, but hopefully most people found like something good about it, something good that came from it.
Yeah. I hope that there's something good that came from it. I certainly did a lot more walking around my neighborhood because it was the only contact that my husband and I had with other people, because we were, isolated at home. But you could have a conversation in somebody's driveway 10 feet apart from each other.
Right.
You're outdoors. So, it felt safe. And so I got to know a lot of my neighbors that I might not have otherwise gotten to know, because some of them weren't home before.
Yeah.
The car and they drove away every day.
Yeah.
But, everybody's been home the last year. So I've gotten to know a lot of the neighbors.
I think if we really spend time thinking about it, there's a lot of good things. And it's probably a good time to just reflect and really spend that time thinking about, like, what were the good things that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for COVID that happened in my life. And I think I've gotten to know myself better through it. I know that. Hi, Rich. Rich says, I like what I'm hearing and I appreciate the topic greatly.
Oh, great.
Questions. We're going to go for a few more minutes here. So you speak for groups like Breaking the Glass and Charles Schwab. And what are the and then you also, let's see, you like to work with women and teach personal development classes in Dress for Success.
Yes.
So tell us about all the other things you do related to
I will have to tell you that I have yet to teach my first class for Dress for Success, because we're trying to figure out how that's going to work. But I have worked with marginalized women for a lot of my writing life. I went to a Buddhist-inspired college, and one of the classes that I was required to take was a community outreach class. And the community outreach was a place where you used your talent, skill, or ability to help someone have something that they might not otherwise have access to. So I taught creative writing in a group home for teenagers. And I went in with the assumption that these were girls placed by the state, but they weren't. These were girls that oftentimes were placed by their own families because things were so tough at home.
Mm.
And so it's where we eventually connected. I taught poetry. And one evening, we hit upon talking about mothers somehow. And I said, "What's the last thing you remember about your mother?" And I remember one woman wrote this poem. She was 15 years old. And she wrote about the day that she arrived at this place called Attention Homes of Boulder and standing on the curb and watching her mother drive away. And just the poignancy of that, knowing that her mother loved her and knowing that things were bad at home and she couldn't be there. So I like working with those kinds of women. I've worked with incarcerated women. I've taught creative writing at the Jefferson County Detention Center in Golden, Colorado. And once again, these aren't women that necessarily have the resource, and plus they're in jail, to go out and take a writing class. But in a writing class, you can do a lot. You can rewrite the ending to your story. You can find imagination and creativity in a place that doesn't really lend itself to imagination or creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So I like working with groups that are a little bit on the margin, a little bit on the fringe. And I think that there is great art there because I think that art is naturally born of chaos. So, and the dark places. Art doesn't necessarily come from the pretty and polite places. So I love working with those kinds of women, and it's my little give back in the world of how can I make another woman's life just a little bit better for just a moment.
How does one do that? How do you do you just approach the president and say, "I'd like to work with women," and they let you, or what happens there?
In Denver, I went to the director of program. They have a director of those kinds of programs at every jail and prison in the country. And you say, "This is what I have to offer. I would like to teach this. And I would like to teach once a week, or I would like to teach every other week," or whatever it is. Then you go in, you go through a series of interviews. You have to go through a series of background checks. You're given instructions like, you can't carry in sharp objects or your phone or anything like that with you. You can just, you can leave that stuff in a locker when you go in, and you just begin.
Wow. I mean, I've not been in a jail, but I've watched that TV show, Orange is the New Black. And I know it's not everything like that, but what I've seen of, on TV and what I've read is I just don't know that people in jail are really prepared to, when they get out, to,
I don't know that
back into the world. And I just would like to do more to help with that.
Yeah, I don't know that they are either. And I know that there's depending on where you are, where you're incarcerated, there may be programs that help you, and in some jails not.
Yeah.
But there's always opportunity. We talked earlier about lifting other women up.
Mm-hmm.
There's always opportunity to lift other women up. And every woman I know has a talent, skill, or ability that they can share with the world, whether it's in a jail, whether it's in a senior center. That's another place that I've taught writing, is in senior centers and assisted living centers, because you can do so much legacy writing. And because the mind is very keen to remember the details of something that happened when you're 8 years old, but not what you had for lunch yesterday.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of the perfect place. But those places exist, and it's a place for us to exercise our humanity and our heart, and also to get a glimpse of, who we are, because those people inform who we are too.
Mm-hmm. I like, another, a friend of mine, one of the things she does to lift other people up, it's not just women, but on LinkedIn every Friday, she's in government contracting, in that space as a consultant, but every Friday she highlights one of her quote unquote competitors, somebody else in that field of government contracting consultant. And she talks about them and what good they're bringing to the world and stuff like that, because that's an abundance mindset. That's a mindset that there's enough for everybody out here. You know, I don't have to put you down so that I can get more. There's enough for both,
Right,
for
right.
all of us.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I
And
feel
that's
that way about other writers, you know, it's like share
yeah.
your resources, share what you've got, you know, help each other. And it's just a good rule of thumb as to how to do your life, period.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. Like I'm a coach and I just recently developed this coaching program. I wouldn't have, if I ran into somebody that coached in the same thing, I wouldn't mind sharing my materials, saying, this is what I do. What do you do? And maybe, you know,
Right.
adopt the best of the best. And it's, you know, people are going to be attracted to me as a coach and to you as a writer because of you and what you write about and because of your story and somebody's connected to that. And same with me. And so like, let's say if we're both coaches, you know, and I hoard my stuff and don't share with you, you know,
Yeah.
you can impact more people if you share.
It's not nearly as much fun. It was like playing Barbies when I was 6 or 7. You know, I loved playing Barbies, and if you played Barbies with another little girl, Barbie suddenly had a bigger wardrobe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. There's more things to do. More, yeah. More clothes for your Barbie. Yeah. I mean, for sure. So where else do you write? Where you sent me this list, I think, of where you write a lot.
I do write a lot. These days, because of the manuscript work I'm doing, I pretty much write a weekly blog. I do a monthly newsletter. I occasionally do an article. I'm not doing regular articles anymore. So I occasionally do an article. But I'll tell you, as I was coming up into my first book, one of the most fun times I had was I was the oldest writer for the Rogue Valley Messenger, which is a little newspaper in Oregon. And I did little lifestyle commentaries. So one week, you know, I interviewed the #1 stripper in the Rogue Valley, and the next week I interviewed the inaugural poet, Richard Blanco. So, you know, it was a big thing, but that was a fun time for me to have that, you know, weekly article to crank out.
Yeah.
So
See, for me, and I want to write more content. I want to write a little bit more. I owe a blog to somebody. I need to write that. I'm going to help write a book. I'm submitting a chapter for a book. So there's different writing tasks that I have. And I put on my calendar that I'm going to write. And for the most part, I'm very strict with what I get done. But the writing I let slip. And I think that's just because I just got to get started. So what happened is I'm in this coaching program and a woman reached out to people in the program and said, hey, look, I'm having trouble, you know, making that time to write content. And I know there's a term for this. I can't remember the name of it, but she said, we meet on, so we did it this morning. We met on Zoom and for an hour and a half and to write. And, you know, we'd say, all right, I'm going to write this blog. And she says, I'm going to write this. And someone else says, I'm going to write that. And then we're still on Zoom, right? I just went on mute and I'm writing. And then all of a sudden she said, okay, how are we all doing? And I about jumped out of my chair because I was so focused. I forgot she was even there. But just being on that Zoom call together and being accountable and saying, I'm going to write this blog, I'm going to do this, and touching base and how's it going, that really helps. So we're going to do that once a week.
yeah, that is a great way to do focused writing. I actually do something similar throughout the week.
Okay.
You know, just to get the work done. There's something about the accountability of you're writing with these other people and you don't want to let them down and
Right.
you know, all of that. And what's kind of amazing is that you do lose track of time because it becomes a very focused kind of writing. So I think that's a great.
Yeah, I'm sitting there typing away, and then she said something, and I seriously, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. I was like, I didn't even know I went, I didn't know you were here. I'd forgotten all about it, but I didn't get up. I didn't get distracted. I was sitting there writing, and I got that project done.
Yep.
It felt good, and sometimes you just need that little boost, that little push to get you over the hump, you know, and then maybe you're writing, you know, I won't put it off as much. Because I'm like, I can do it. I feel good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. Crank out that blog.
So how long is the next book that you've got coming out, the Creatrix book?
The book comes out on August 24th.
But how many pages is it?
Oh, how many pages is it? I don't know.
I don't know. It's not like a 500-page book.
No, it's not a 500 page. I'm trying to reach.
You have it? You have the cover and everything?
Yeah, I have the cover and everything.
Oh, cool.
This is my advanced reader's copy. I don't know if I'm holding this. So, and we are at 146, 147 pages. Yeah.
So people can go on Amazon now and pre-order.
Amazon or indiebound.org or bookshop.org, and you can pre-order now. So.
Okay, that's awesome. And then your other book is Delightful Little Book on Aging, and that's available on Amazon too.
Correct. Available wherever you get your books online.
Wherever you get your books. And then you've got a website.
Yep, Byline-Stephanie.
Yeah. What can people find there?
You'll find my blogs. You'll find my books. You'll find I have a resource page that are women's companies and women's organizations that make a difference.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I do, like you, I'm pretty strict with my content. So I do post once a week. And if you sign up for my website and I get your email address, I also send out a monthly newsletter. So
yeah, I get your newsletter. So I enjoy getting those. And then you have an author's page on Facebook.
You have an author's page on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram if you're on Instagram. But.
Yeah, I didn't type that in, but yes, you're on Instagram too. But Stephanie,
I'm there. Byline Stephanie on Instagram. You'll find me.
Byline Stephanie.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, any last bit of advice you want to leave to women like me who are approaching 60 and
60 beyond? Is a glorious, glorious decade. You know, I'm in my last year of 60. I just turned 69. Yeah. So this is the last year of being 60. And it's a glorious time, but it's up to you to make it that way. You know, the world doesn't owe you, right? And that myth of insignificance, it is just that. It is a myth. If you're feeling insignificant, that call is coming from inside the house. So this is a time to be brave and be bold and stand in the light of your truth and speak it and shine a light so that other women, the women behind you, have something to follow.
I love that. The insignificance thing, I want to touch on that a little bit. So, you know, I retired. I didn't call it a retirement. I graduated after working.
I like that. Graduated is good.
I called it graduation in May of 2019. And people are like, oh, your brain's going to turn to mush. You can't retire. You know, I think people have this connotation of retirement, like you had said earlier, just sitting on the couch and watching TV. And that's not me. I can't do that. I, got to do something. But I think we all want to feel like we're contributing and we all want to feel significant. And as I get older, I don't want to lose that, the feeling that I'm doing something that makes a difference.
Yeah. I think that it takes a little more work as we get older. You know, you're not going to get the same kind of input or validation that you did for a job where maybe somebody gave you a plaque for being the employee of the month or something. You're not going to get that. And a lot of women, my age, your age, do go into some kind of encore career where they feel like they're making a difference. You make a great difference in your work. You have great significance in what you do. The message that you put out to other women, the coaching that you do to help that transition from the working life to like what the next chapter is. So I think it's something that we all need to work on. And, you are as significant as you feel inside of yourself. But just keep remembering that there is a reason nature keeps you alive as long as she does.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be significant, it could be that you touch one person's life, right? It doesn't have to be that you're like the vice president and you're,
Right. I mean, it could be just touching one person's life. You're absolutely right. And the thing about, touching another person's life is often we don't know the difference we make.
No, I know. Just by saying something, or even sometimes just a smile that you make to somebody at the grocery store or whatever. You don't know what they were thinking. Your little smile how that picked them up, and they changed their mind about what they were going to do that day. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So say viva la significance, but it's from inside here. It's from your heart. It isn't up to anyone else to make you feel significant.
That's a good point. That's a good way to end it. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
I enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, me too. I'm just going to end it, and then you can stay and we'll chat for just a second.
Okay.
Thank you all for watching. We didn't have a lot of questions today, but we got some good supportive comments. So I'm glad that you guys participated.